At the end of this lesson, you will know the difference between an independent clause and dependent clause. So what is an independent clause? It is a group of words that forms a complete thought and can stand alone as a sentence. It contains a subject and a predicate, which has a verb, and expresses a complete idea. For example, she walked to the park. Our subject in the sentence is she, and our predicate is walked to the park. Our verb here is walked. What about a dependent clause? Well, it is also known as a subordinate clause. It is a group of words that contains a subject and a verb, but does not express a complete thought. It relies on an independent clause to complete its meaning and often begins with subordinating conjunctions like because, although, when, if, while, etc. Examples. Example number 1. Because she was tired. This is our dependent clause. She decided to take a nap. She decided to take a nap is our independent clause because this on its own can stand alone. It makes sense. It expresses a complete thought. Whereas because she was tired cannot stand on its own. It wouldn't make sense. Example number 2. Although he studied hard, he didn't perform well on the test. Our dependent clause here is although he studied hard. It starts with a subordinating conjunction, although. And on its own, it doesn't make sense. So it needs the independent clause, which is he didn't perform well on the test. Number 3. When it rains, I prefer to stay indoors. Our dependent clause in this sentence is when it rains. Our conjunction is when, and on its own, it doesn't make sense. It needs the independent clause, which is I prefer to stay indoors. Number 4 example. If you need help, don't hesitate to ask. Our dependent clause in this sentence is if you need help. It starts with a conjunction, if. And again, it relies on our independent clause, which is don't hesitate to ask. Let's now have a short quiz to see how well you understood the difference between an independent clause and dependent clause. Question number 1. Identify the independent clause in the following sentence. She went to the store after the rain stopped. I'll give you 3 seconds to think about your answer. Did you choose she went to the store? If you did, that's amazing because that is our independent clause because it expresses a complete thought. It has a subject, which is she, and it has the predicate went to the store. Question number 2. Identify the dependent clause in the following sentence. Because I studied hard, I aced the exam. Again, I'll give you 3 seconds to think about your answer. Did you choose because I studied hard? If you did, you are absolutely correct. Because I studied hard is a dependent clause. It cannot stand alone. It doesn't express a complete thought. It needs the independent clause, I aced the exam. So it makes sense and it expresses a complete thought. Question number 3. Combine the following 2 clauses into a single complex sentence. Our independent clause is the sun was shining. Our dependent clause is although it was cold. I'll give you 5 seconds to think about it and put the sentence together so it makes sense. What does your sentence sound like? Is it same as mine? Although it was cold, the sun was shining. Let me know in the comments below what you came up with. How did you go with a short quiz? Did you get 3 out of 3? If you did, that's amazing. That means you fully understood the difference between an independent clause and a dependent clause. So again, to wrap up, an independent clause can stand on its own. It expresses a complete thought, whereas a dependent clause cannot stand on its own. It relies on the independent clause, so it makes sense. If you've learned anything from this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you next time.